Black Mafia, also known as the Philadelphia Black Mafia, PBM, Black Muslim Mafia and Muslim Mob, was a Philadelphia-based African-American organized crime syndicate. The organization began in the 1960s as a relatively small criminal collective in South Philadelphia, known for holding up neighborhood crap games and dealing in the illegal drug business. But at its height of operation in the early 1970s until about the early 80s, it managed to consolidate power and control a large portion of criminal activity in various African-American neighborhoods throughout Philadelphia and the Delaware Valley that is the Philadelphia metro area, including South Jersey, especially Atlantic City and Camden, Chester, and Wilmington. In addition to drug trafficking, burglary, and armed robbery, the Black Mafia was also engaged in traditional organized crime activities such as political corruption, extortion, racketeering, prostitution, loan sharking, number running, and other illegal gambling rackets. Allegedly formed in September 1968 by Samuel Christian, who later adopted the name Suleiman Bey under the Nation of Islam, the Black Mafia was heavily involved in a large part of drug trafficking in Philadelphia during the 1970s, with heroin being the most trafficked drug. Christian, a former Black Panther with an extensive arrest record, was an imposing man, 5 feet 10 inches tall and described as a thick-necked, powerfully built, 215-pound bully. Additional founding members included Ronald Harvey, Henry Dabney, Richard Porkchops James, Donald Donnie Day, Clyde Apples Ross, Robert Bop Daddy Fairbanks, Craig Heist Jones, Walter Hudgens, Robert Nudie Mims, amongst others. Many of the original members eventually became Nation of Islam members or converted to Islam, giving the organization the nickname of the Muslim Mafia or the Muslim Mob. The Black Mafia gained power in local neighborhoods by intimidating people to prevent anyone from reporting the group's activities to the police. Because of this, police had incredible difficulty taking any action on the gang or any of its members for years after their conception. Members initially participated in holding up crap games, extorting drug dealers, and working as numbers men and illegitimate businessmen. But they eventually ended up controlling entire rackets and gaining influence with local politicians. Over the course of their control, the Black Mafia was responsible for over 40 murders and countless other crimes. Each founder had extensive arrest records, with most cases involving violence. Law enforcement officials had difficulties prosecuting members of the group, however, because witnesses would rarely cooperate, fearing retaliation, and cases were dropped more often than not. This not only permitted the offenders to continue their criminal activities, but also allowed their reputations of being untouchable to flourish, thus enhancing their influence on the street. The Black Mafia was formed to coordinate and consolidate historic inner-city crime in numbers, prostitution, and extortion of legitimate businesses, while combining with the rising drug demand in Philadelphia. It can be argued that their success drove legitimate black business and capital, such as the numerous successful African-American-owned banks, medical practices, stores, landlords, and other African-American businesses to escape the city as segregation pressures faded. Angelo Bruno, the Don of the Philadelphia crime family, discouraged drug dealing in South Philadelphia, but could not prevent deals being made by the New York Mafia families such as the Gambino crime family, which were doing business with the growing black organized crime that became the Black Mafia, until black New York drug lord Frank Matthews became their supplier. Bruno turned a blind eye to many of the renegade Italian gangsters who did businesses with, or supplied, the black drug lords, so long as they met their financial obligations to him and to the New York families. In fact, a rough outline of Italian organized crime IOC east of Broad Street, with Black OC west of Broad Street, became a shorthand to describe South Philadelphia's hidden forces for decades, damning efforts at urban renewal. The earliest documented act committed by the Black Mafia was the April 19, 1969, murder of one of the group's founders, Nathaniel Rock'n'Roll Williams. Williams arranged a crap game above a barbershop at Broad, 14th and South Street. As usual, several Black Mafia leaders participated in the game. Curiously, Williams was absent from his own crap game. Thus, when two gunmen busted into the room and robbed the pot and the players, suspicions arose. The Black Mafia leadership almost immediately heard in the street what they already suspected, that Williams had engineered the stick-up, using neighborhood gang members, and that Williams had driven the getaway car himself. An hour and a half after the robbery, Witnesses saw two men marching Williams out of a bar at 15th and South Street at gunpoint. Williams' corpse was found in an isolated area near the naval base in South Philadelphia. 4 bullets had been fired into his back. Police would later characterize the homicide as a Black Mafia execution. Jerome Barnes was arrested for Williams' murder on August 12, 1969. In a trend that would be repeated numerous times throughout the Black Mafia's tenure, charges against Barnes were dropped when police were unable to line up witnesses who could identify him. Please take a second to give this video a like and also to subscribe to the Millennial channel. Jeremiah Shabazz owned bakeries and food stores through the first Philadelphia NOI mosque or masjid, which would later be publicly criticized by NOI leadership in Chicago for drawing too much attention to itself as a gangster mosque. Recent academic works in criminal justice are filling in the gaps using FBI, court, and police records to substantiate the long association of Shabazz, also known as Jeremiah Pugh, with the growth of organized black crime in Philadelphia. Shabazz's West Philadelphia Mosque boasted of the most prominent members of organized black crime in Philadelphia. The difficulty this precedent created would play out dramatically when the FBI overheard 2 high-level heroin dealers complain that they were being overly extorted by Shamsuddin Ali, also known as Clarence Fowler, the who had replaced Shabazz. That probe would land the drug investigation on the desk of then-Mayor John Street, as Dawood Bey complained that the dealers were out here hustling, while Shamsuddin Ali requested $5,000 to be delivered to Connie Little, former Democratic ward leader, and John Street's executive secretary. John Street escaped prosecution, but several of his key people drew successful federal prosecutions that put an end to their careers. The Black Mafia used formalized meetings and legal incorporated nonprofits as cover, and imposed a hierarchy on its members in an attempt to create discipline among members. The command structure in 1968 consisted of 14 individuals with a mean age of 29. Low-ranking members were named the Little Brothers. Members could move up in the chain of command according to certain established criteria. The meetings were organized at different locations between 1969 and 1975 based on this hierarchy. While later iterations of leadership did not wish to record activities on paper, as the gang gained local control, separate meetings were held for those holding positions of power and those who were general members. The average number of attendees ranged from 40 to 60 members, with some being allowed to take notes. Many members were transported to and from meetings while blindfolded by more powerful members to avoid compromising the secrecy of the location. As demonstrated by the manner in which meetings were run, oaths and rules were prevalent so that the group could avoid exposure. A secrecy oath was required to be taken by the members to ensure secrecy and that members would not disclose important information. The oath also swore to report any violations of the oath under risk to family and other members. A strict set of written rules were created to govern these meetings as well. For example, each member upon entry to meetings was required to be searched by authorized members. Only the presiding member at the meeting was allowed to appoint who could carry weapons. The Mafia organized 3 different community service projects as a front to their criminal activity during their control. Other gangs posed a threat to the power of the Black Mafia, so organizations were created to combat gang violence, though Mafia violence was still encouraged. One organization included Black Bee Inc. Their aim was to put an end to gang activity in the African American community. City residents and local law enforcement who saw the gang war unfolding in the streets, though, knew that the Black Mafia was behind the council. The Black Mafia also had their sights on high-up drug dealers and crime leaders. Tyrone Palmer, known as Mr. Millionaire, was assassinated on Easter Sunday 1972 in Atlantic City, New Jersey, by associates of the Black Mafia. Palmer, a big-time cocaine and heroin dealer and the primary Philadelphia area contact for New York City drug dealers, was shot in the face in plain view of around 1,000 people at the Club Harlem by Black Mafia founding member Sam Christian. Before Palmer's bodyguards could defend themselves, the Mafia opened fire in the club, wounding 20 people. In addition to Palmer, 3 women and one of Palmer's bodyguards were killed. By far the most well-known act of crime that the Black Mafia carried out The 1973 Hanafi Muslim massacre was what gained them national media attention. On January 18, 1973, the Mafia murdered 7 Sunni Muslims. 2 adults and 5 children, aged 9 days to 10 years, were murdered. The adults and 1 child were shot while the other children were drowned. The intended target of this crime was Hamas Abdul Khalis. This was allegedly for a letter he had written to the NOI members, claiming that Elijah Muhammad was a false prophet, and that certain members of Elijah Muhammad's NOI were merely gangsters who were harming the name of Islam. The difficulty in obtaining evidence to successfully prosecute the crime fomented a breakdown by Khalis as he sought to draw attention to the case of his murdered family, eventually resulting in the 1977 Hanafi siege. By 1973, the Mafia were beginning to lose anonymity due to the increasing scale of their crimes and the increased law enforcement and media attention. The Philadelphia Inquirer, as cited in Sean Griffin's Philadelphia's Black Mafia, A Social and Political History, reported, "The Black Mafia is real. It is not a cop fantasy, newspaperman's pipe dream or movie myth. It is a black crime syndicate that has been growing unchecked in Philadelphia for the past 5 years. It has expanded and evolved into a powerful crime cartel with chains of command, enforcers, soldiers, financiers, regular business meetings and assigned territories. It specializes in narcotics, extortion, and murder, with minor interests in loan sharking, numbers, and prostitution. It has a war chest that bankrolls drugs and gambling and buys the best lawyers." The original Black Mafia's power was beginning to fracture, though, by 1974. In September 1974, 21 members and group affiliates were arrested in an early morning raid by federal drug agents and the Justice Department's crime strike force. The Black Mafia would fracture and reform several more times, each generation remaking itself more light, agile, and deadly, with growing political influence. One rumored source of information that led to a bust was community activist Charles Robinson, a member of a community group that became heavily dominated by Black Mafia members while taking government grants. Robinson, as informant, states that he feared for his family as Black Mafia influence grew. He likely also wisely feared the inevitable investigation into the use of the funds. Robinson was a brother-in-law to Mafia member James Fox. Fox allegedly had been intimidating Robinson's family, specifically his mother. Evidence was gained from 21 days of wiretapping Mafia members' phone lines. Members were charged with different crimes, including but not limited to heroin and cocaine distribution, rape, and murder. This hardly ended the reign of terror. Philly's stop snitching culture can be attributed to the success of the Black Mafia in silencing entire communities so effectively that wiretapping would be the modus operandi of successful prosecutions. The Black Mafia are suspected in the unsolved murder of Tasmaya Taz Lang, the manager and girlfriend of Philadelphia singer Teddy Pendergrass, who was shot dead on the doorstep of her home in 1976. They allegedly resented Lang's control over Pendergrass' lucrative music career.
Major Benjamin Coxon, also known as the Major, was an American gangster from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He was a flamboyant entrepreneur and civil rights activist who co-owned a Philadelphia nightclub with activist Stanley Branch. He also was close friends and neighbor to the great Muhammad Ali, and ran unsuccessfully for mayor of Camden, New Jersey in 1972. Coxon was a powerful drug dealer and power broker in Philadelphia who served as an intermediary between African American and Italian American organized crime groups. He was murdered at his home in Cherry Hill, New Jersey in 1973, which the police theorized that the Philadelphia Black Mafia killed him for his failure to broker a heroin deal with the New York Mafia. Major Coxon was born in 1929 in Fairbank, Pennsylvania, to Israel and Maybelle Coxon. He attended Benjamin Franklin High School in Philadelphia. As a teenager, he worked at shoe shine stands and car washes, investing the money in used car lots, car dealerships, and other enterprises. Coxon was drafted into the military in 1946. Coxon co-owned a nightclub named the Rolls-Royce Lounge in Center City, Philadelphia, with civil rights activist Stanley Branch. While running the nightclub, Coxon was deeply involved in organized crime and operated as a drug kingpin. Coxon was arrested 17 times and convicted 10 on fraud and larceny charges. He served 22 months in a federal prison in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania for his involvement in an interstate car theft ring. He was involved in the establishment of dummy corporations for money laundering, credit card fraud, and extortion. Companies such as Crescent Furniture Company, Pyramid Enterprises, Barry Goldstein Agency, and Fairmount Foods drew checks that were made payable to Elijah Muhammad's mosque number in Philadelphia. Coxon was a close friend and neighbor of Muhammad Ali when he lived in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. They met in 1968 when Ali spoke at a fundraiser for a neighborhood organization called the Black Coalition, of which Coxon was a board member. In 1970, after Muhammad Ali defeated Jerry Quarry in the ring, he grabbed the microphone from Howard Cosell and declared, "I dedicate this win to Major Coxon, the future mayor of Camden, New Jersey." In 1972, Coxon ran for mayor of Camden, but lost to Angelo Ericetti. When questioned during the campaign about his criminal record, Coxon replied, "Most politicians start out as office holders and wind up getting arrested. I aim to reverse that process." Major Coxon. Coxon was an associate of Angelo Bruno, the boss of the Philadelphia crime family, and acted as a broker between African-American and Italian-American crime syndicates in Philadelphia. Coxon was the Black Mafia's narcotic connection. He received high-grade heroin from the notorious East Coast drug trafficker Frank Matthews. On June 8, 1973, Coxon was murdered in his home on Barber Drive in Cherry Hill. Coxon, along with his companion, her daughter, and her oldest son, were bound and shot. Her younger son was also bound but was able to escape and alert a neighbor. One of the victims told police that 4 black men in a Cadillac arrived at the house at 4 a.m. He stated that they honked the car horn and were let in the house by Coxon. Therefore, he assumed they were friends. The 5 men spoke for a while before the violence began. It was theorized that the Black Mafia ordered Coxon killed for failing to broker a major heroin deal between the 5 families from New York City and the Philadelphia Black Mafia. The 2 lead suspects in the murders were Black Mafia members Ronald Harvey and Samuel Christian. Harvey was a Philadelphia crime figure that was the 320th person placed on the FBI 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list for his suspected involvement in the Coxon murder. He was arrested and indicted on 11 counts regarding the Coxon murder with bail set at $3 million. He was eventually convicted of the 1973 Hanafi Muslim massacre of 2 men and 5 children in Washington, D.C. in January 1973. Harvey was never charged with the Coxon murder and died in prison. Christian was the 321st person placed on the FBI 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list for his suspected involvement with the Coxon murder. Christian was not convicted of the Coxon murder since no witnesses were willing to come forward. Frank Matthews was born on February 13, 1944, in Durham, North Carolina. His mother died when he was 4 years old, and he was raised by his aunt, Marzella Steele, the wife of a lieutenant in the Durham Police Department. He was nicknamed Pee-wee in his youth and attended the East End Elementary School but dropped out in the 7th grade. At age 14, Matthews led a teenage gang in stealing chickens from local farms. When confronted by a farmer, Matthews assaulted him with a brick. He was arrested in October 1960 and served a year for theft and assault at the Raleigh State Reformatory for Boys. Upon his release, Matthews moved to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where he worked as a numbers writer. He made contacts that would become his future Philadelphia drug connections, including Major Coxon and members of the Black Mafia. Matthews was arrested in 1963 and avoided conviction by agreeing to leave Philadelphia. Frank moved to the Bedford-Stuyvesant area of Brooklyn, New York, and became a barber, collecting numbers as he had in Philadelphia, as well as working as a loan shark and enforcer. In 1965, he grew tired of the numbers game. In order to make more money, he transitioned into the heroin trade. During this period, the main supply of wholesale heroin came from the American Mafia through their famed French connection. Matthews attempted to partner with the Gambino and Bonanno crime families, but both organizations declined. Frank then approached a criminal acquaintance named Spanish Raymond Marquez, a prolific Harlem numbers operator, who put him in contact with Cuban Mafia boss Rolando Gonzalez Nuez, a major cocaine supplier. Shortly before fleeing to Venezuela to avoid an indictment, Gonzalez sold Matthews his first kilogram of cocaine for $20,000, with a promise to supply more in the future. The relationship between Matthews and Gonzalez expanded into a lucrative and expansive drug trafficking network, with Gonzalez regularly sending large loads of cocaine and heroin from South America. Matthews expanded on this and, within a year, was one of the major players in the New York drug trade. Realizing the need for diversification, he would continually seek out new sources of supply for narcotics, willing to do business with anyone as long as the product was sufficiently pure. He also developed a cocaine dependence that grew along with his business and power. By the early 1970s, his organization was handling multi-million-dollar loads of heroin, with Matthews himself earning an estimated $10 million in 1972. According to the DEA, Matthews controlled the cutting, packaging, and sale of heroin in every major East Coast city. In New York, he operated two massive drug mills in Brooklyn, one located at Prospect Place, nicknamed the Ponderosa, and the other at 101 East 56th Street, nicknamed the OK Corral. Both locations were heavily fortified and secured, with walls reinforced with steel and concrete and protected by guards with automatic weapons. Besides controlling the retail sale of heroin, the Matthews organization supplied other major dealers throughout the East Coast with multi-kilogram shipments for up to $26,000 per kilogram. Matthews was known to supply heroin to Philadelphia through Major Coxon, who then sold it to the Black Mafia. Matthews purchased a house in the Mafia enclave in Tot Hill, Staten Island, across the street from Gambino family boss Paul Castellano. He would take multiple trips to Las Vegas with suitcases full of cash to have his drug money laundered at casinos for a fee of 15 to 18%. In 1971, Frank invited major African American and Hispanic drug traffickers throughout the country to attend a meeting in Atlanta, Georgia, to discuss means of importing heroin without Mafia involvement. The DEA became aware of the meeting and monitored who attended. Those present decided to build stronger independent relationships with the Corsican Mafia and possibly the Cuban Mafia. In addition, they agreed to diversify their product to include cocaine, which was becoming available in massive quantities. The Atlanta meeting was significant because it underscored the changing nature of the drug business. Whereas previously the American Mafia controlled the importing and wholesaling of narcotics, therefore controlling who could and could not advance past them, now others were establishing their own pipelines. Before, the Mafia asserted behind-the-scenes control of the business while African Americans sold and used the drugs in their cities. Now the black dealers established connections and took control of their neighborhoods. This later evolved to include not just black people controlling the business, but also local black gangs eliminating out-of-town black suppliers trying to control their neighborhoods from a distance. His clashes with the Philadelphia Black Mafia resulted in bloodshed on Easter Sunday, 1972, when Tyrone Mr. Millionaire Palmer, Matthews' main dealer in Philadelphia, was killed in a gunfight at an Atlantic City nightclub. Many innocent bystanders were shot during the gunfight, with 5 people killed and 26 injured. No one was prosecuted for the crime, and none of the 799 potential witnesses came forward. 3 of Matthews' top lieutenants were also murdered by the Black Mafia. Later in 1972, Matthews held another summit in Las Vegas at the Sands Hotel during the Muhammad Ali against Jerry Quarry boxing rematch. Soon afterward, police received authority to tap Matthews' phone lines, resulting in recordings of Matthews discussing drug transactions. Ernie Corraluzzo, an associate of the Genovese crime family's Greenwich Village crew, negotiated the sale of 40 kilograms of heroin to Matthews for $375,000 during a meeting at the Waldorf Astoria, New York in April 1973. While Matthews delivered the fee via an intermediary the following day, Corraluzzo failed to provide the drugs and instead fled to the Bahamas. Matthews and his associates then kidnapped James Big Jimmy Capotorto, an underling and bodyguard to Corraluzzo, in an effort to retrieve the money. Upon hearing of the kidnapping, Corraluzzo took a flight back to New York, returned the $375,000 to Matthews, and gave him 25 kilograms of heroin on consignment. In December 1972, Matthews was indicted by federal prosecutors in Brooklyn for attempting to sell 40 pounds of cocaine in Miami, Florida, between April and September 1972. In January 1973, the DEA arrested Matthews at McCarran International Airport in Las Vegas, ahead of a planned trip to Los Angeles with his girlfriend, on charges of tax evasion and conspiracy to distribute heroin and cocaine. A federal magistrate originally set bail at $5 million, the highest bail amount ever set at the time. Bail was reduced to $2.5 million when Matthews agreed to not fight extradition to New York. After a few weeks in detention in New York, Matthews' bail was further reduced to $325,000. He was indicted on 6 counts of tax evasion and conspiracy to distribute heroin and cocaine, and faced 50 years in prison. On July 2, 1973, Matthews was scheduled to appear in a Brooklyn courthouse but never showed. He allegedly took $20 million and fled the country with his girlfriend. Matthews left behind his common-law wife, their 3 sons, and their Staten Island mansion, and was never seen again. Former DEA agent Frank Panessa stated in a July 2022 interview that the agency received unconfirmed reports that Matthews had been lured to the Bahamas by the Genovese and killed, partly to keep him from turning state's witness, and partially due to his feud with Corraluzzo. The FBI placed a $20,000 reward for Matthews, the highest set by a federal agency since the Bureau placed the same amount for the capture of bank robber John Dillinger. Hamas Abdul Khalis-born Ernest Timothy McGee was leader of the Hanafi movement, a black Muslim group based in Washington. Khalis founded the group following a split with the Nation of Islam in 1957. In 1971, he won the support of the basketball star Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but in 1973 his family was murdered. Enraged by the murders, he organized a 1977 siege of Washington, D.C., in which 2 of the 149 hostages died. He spent the rest of his life in prison after being found guilty of conspiracy to commit kidnapping while armed, second-degree murder, 2 counts of assault with intent to kill while armed, 1 count of assault with a dangerous weapon, and 24 counts of kidnapping while armed. He was born to Seventh-day Adventist parents in Gary, Indiana, as Ernest Timothy McGee. He graduated 22nd in a class of 135 at Roosevelt High School, and he played percussion instruments and eventually converted to Roman Catholicism. He attended Purdue University and Midwestern Conservatory. He was discharged from the U.S. Army on grounds of schizophrenia. He was a talented jazz drummer and played with Bud Powell, Charlie Parker, Max Roach, Billie Holiday, and J.J. Johnson in New York City. He was accepted to Columbia University, but his GI Bill funds expired after just 1 semester without the ability to finish his degree. Further applications were denied, which was a typical experience for black men attempting to make use of the GI Bill. Although he remained high-functioning in everyday life and excelled at jazz and his undergraduate studies, he was unable to find stable employment because of his schizophrenia diagnosis. He was 27 at the time that the schizophrenia diagnosis was frequently used to marginalize and institutionalize black men. Influenced by the popularity of Islam in the New York jazz scene, he joined the Nation of Islam and, in accordance with the group's rejection of slave surnames, changed his name to Ernest 2 times or Ernest McGee. In 1954, at the suggestion of Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad named him the National Secretary of the NOI, a position he held until 1957. Muhammad also sent him to Chicago to head the University of Islam. In an interview, Hamas said, "Elijah once said that I was next in line to him, that it was me, not Malcolm X." In 1959, he appeared on the television documentary The Hate That Hate, produced alongside Malcolm X, but by this time he had already left the nation, denouncing the personality cult around Elijah Muhammad. At an unknown point following his departure, Hamas met a Sunni Muslim mystic named Tasibur Udain Rahman, an immigrant from Kolkata. Rahman was an active participant in the South Asian Barelvi movement and conveyed the movement's view of Islam to Khalis. Instead of describing himself as Barelvi, Khalis adopted the name Hanafi, the predominant school of religious jurisprudence, madhab within the movement, and opened a Hanafi madhab center in Washington, D.C. It appears that he may have been drawn to the word Hanafi, which means rightly guided, and refers to the followers of Muhammad. In December 1960, Hamas briefly returned to Chicago and personally appealed to Elijah Muhammad to take the Shahada and convert to Sunni Islam. When this was denied, he founded a separate organization with the legal name American Social Federation for Mutual Improvement, Inc. In 1968, he was arrested for attempted extortion, but released on grounds of mental illness. The same year, militant blacks at Howard University formed a group called the Kokai family. When that group was disbanded, many of its members became members of Hamas's Hanafi American Mussulmans Rifle and Pistol Club, which was given a group membership charter by the National Rifle Association of America. In 1971, Khalis converted basketball player Lou Alcindor to Islam. After his conversion, Alcindor adopted the name Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Abdul-Jabbar donated a fieldstone mansion, 77 16th Street, NW, to serve as the headquarters of his organization in Washington, D.C. In 1972, he circulated an open letter that referred to Elijah Muhammad as a lying deceiver and asserted that he lured former dope addicts and prostitutes to monk-like lives of sacrifice that would lead them to hell. He claimed credit for Malcolm X's leaving the Nation of Islam. In a 1973 interview, Khalis said he was teaching Malcolm X about Sunni Islam. He used to come to my house on Long Island, and we would sit in his car for hours. He would meet me after he left the temple, never in public because he knew they were after him. He was saying the wrong things. On January 18, 1973, Khalis's family was murdered inside their Washington, D.C. home, in retaliation for letters that he had written against the Nation of Islam. 2 members of his family survived. His daughter Amina was shot 6 times and sustained permanent brain damage, and his wife Bibi entered a vegetative state from which she never recovered. Hamas would care for Bibi at home despite her constant moaning. Following the shooting, the Nation of Islam mocked him in their newspaper. He died at the Federal Correctional Complex prison in Butner, North Carolina, on November 13, 2003. The Hanafi Madhab Center is still operating today but is mostly used by his descendants. In the 1980s, the JBM developed out of the street culture of Philadelphia and represented an attempt to form an organized crime syndicate modeled on La Cosa Nostra and the original Black Mafia. The JBM espoused an amalgam of characteristics which purposely emulated LCN and Black Mafia control over organized crime and its fondness for symbols and ceremony. At the same time, the JBM retained its resemblance to the street gangs which provided most members with their first initiation into crime. These characteristics include a racially and culturally homogeneous membership and the wearing of group insignia. The JBM is composed exclusively of young black males, with female participation non-existent except in the supporting roles of couriers and fronts for rentals and purchases. The original members wore gold rings with the JBM initials encrusted with diamonds. The JBM was conceived in 1986 and born in 1987 as an organization dedicated to exploiting the seemingly limitless profit potential created by the crack epidemic. JBM founders Aaron Jones, then 26, Mark Casey, then 23, and Leonard Patterson, then 27, grew up together on the streets of West Philadelphia. They shared a common vision centered around Aaron Jones's fascination with the movie The Godfather. One associate of the JBM described the roles of the three founders. Aaron Jones was obsessed with the movie, The Godfather. He saw himself as being the Godfather and Leonard Patterson as Sonny. They focused on drugs because loan sharking and numbers were not big money makers. Extortion was ruled out because people did not go along with that anymore. Mark Casey was the brains of the JBM. Casey was the one who came up with the ideas and knew how to put things together. Leonard Patterson was most likely the person who came up with the name JBM and the idea for the rings. To strengthen group resources and to broaden the base of distribution, the JBM founders began to recruit friends and associates who already had established drug networks in various parts of the city. Some associates joined voluntarily, hoping to maximize their drug profits. Those who were initially skeptical of the benefits of JBM membership were persuaded through violence, threats, and intimidation. The JBM attempted to organize under a single umbrella with networks in North Central, Northwest, and Southwest Philadelphia. What began as a loose criminal association quickly evolved into a lucrative drug network, with a total distribution estimated at 100 to 200 kilos of cocaine per month at its peak. As the JBM began to take shape, the fledgling organization formed a board of commissioners composed of all the original members. Although board members in theory shared power equally, and decisions were to be based on consensus, informants state that Aaron Jones quickly assumed a dominant role on the board, becoming the de facto chairman. The board determined whom to admit to membership and whom to exclude and attempted to resolve disputes. Potential members had to be recommended by an original member and approved by the board. The primary criterion was that prospective members had to have drug networks capable of moving large quantities of narcotics. Each member was responsible for distributing drugs to a network of people. The networks varied in size and capacity and serviced different areas of Philadelphia. JBM members shared considerable knowledge of the clients and the workers of each other's networks. It was believed that this common knowledge was intended to reduce friction based on inadvertently soliciting clients or workers claimed by other members. Members often had a second-in-command for their own operation to provide for continuity and leadership in case of arrest. From the earliest days of the JBM, members and associates of the old Black Mafia served as mentors to various JBM members and are known to have played an important advisory role in the formation and development of the junior Black Mafia. Many believe it was younger relatives of the original Black Mafia. The JBM cooperates with associates of the Italian-American Bruno Scarfo Mafia crime family in the distribution of cocaine and appears to have modeled its criminal methods after that LCN organization as well as the original Black Mafia, relying heavily on violence and extortion to further its drug enterprise. Samuel Christian, also known as Richard Carter or as Suleiman Bey, formerly a high-ranking member of the Black Mafia, waged an unsuccessful attempt to gain control of the JBM after his release from prison in late 1989. Christian called a meeting, ostensibly for the purpose of mediating a dispute between the JBM and rival narcotics networks. Under the guise of seeking unity and an end to factional violence, Christians sought to exploit both groups financially. In addition to using La Cosa Nostra as a model for their organization, JBM members and associates have developed a number of links with mob members and associates. For example, JBM advisor Michael Youngblood used LCN connections to obtain cocaine and methamphetamine for his drug trafficking operation. In 1983, Youngblood was indicted on drug charges along with George Martirano, the son of Philadelphia mob member Raymond Long John Martirano. JBM members have been observed meeting mob associates at known Mafia hangouts in South Philadelphia. Another member was seen in the company of Joey Merlino at local sporting events. The Junior Mafia is estimated to have approximately 100 members and about 300 street-level associates. Its members drive expensive cars and still often wear gold jewelry and rings with the JBM initials encrusted in diamonds. JBM has sought to expand its drug trafficking profits by offering independent narcotic dealers membership in the JBM. The Pennsylvania Crime Commission documented 2 1989 incidents in which the JBM targeted for death those dealers who turned down such offers. Like most local gangs, the JBM supplied sales and distribution services in the United States' fifth-largest city to major international drug cartels, enabling these cartels to grow. The leader of the JBM, Aaron Jones, is currently on death row in Pennsylvania. Officials have reported that a relative of the late Russell Barnes, Dennis Anwar Barnes, who frequents Philadelphia and New York, is poised to take control. Because of his close ties to Philadelphia's black mafia underworld and his ability to network and organize